Hello, Jerry Ludlow here and welcome to my channel. Now we're here to improve your watercolour painting, and today's study is painting the sea, and there's some rocks and the sky. Now it's going to take about 25 minutes to complete, so why not paint along with me? Now I've already done the drawing, and I've done quite a few more pencil lines than I'd normally do, and if you do the same, it will leave you with areas that you'll have pencil marks in, and it will remind you to keep that clear when you're doing the water. You know, areas where like the froth is and things like that. Now I'm going to be starting with the sky, and I'm using a medium mop brush, and the colours are Cobalt blue and Cerulean blue, and I'm going to wet the paper first of all. Now the paper is Arches 140 pounds rough. Now put the water on just to let the colour flow more easily, and I do work quite fast with the brush, starting from the top, bringing it down, and this is going to be the cloud shapes. Now I've already drawn in the cloud shapes with a pencil to give me a guide, and I'm just stopping just short of the pencil marks so that when it dries I can rub those pencil marks out. Now that's the sky done. It will dry it lighter, and I'm just putting in some of the cloud shadow now with some sepia and a little Payne's grey and a lot of water. Don't want this to be too dark. This is quite a staining colour, this one, so you need to be careful not to put too much on. And as you can see, I'm putting some water on here with it. I'll be doing this cloud area in 3 stages. This is the lighter grey colour, and I'm using a slightly smaller mop so I can cover quite an area quite fast. And I'm using the same colours but a lot thicker, and I'm going to go in again while the paint's still wet. This is wet in wet, and I'm going to bring that down to the area where the rocks and the sea are, being careful to keep that nice straight line at the bottom, and just going around this rock to the right. Following the pencil marks. It doesn't matter so much with the dark rocks because they'll be covered, the pencil marks will be covered. Now on a lovely turquoise sea here, and to achieve that I'm going to be using Cobalt turquoise and Cerulean blue. Now I'm using a smallish mop brush called a Tintoretto, and this is a size 6. Keeps a very nice point. Now I'm just working my way down the paper, keeping clear of those pencil marks, remembering to leave those white spaces because the white froth and the waves is plain paper and not paint. So I've got my wave shapes already done with the pencil, and then when this dries I'll be removing them with a putty rubber. I'm trying to get as much painting done here as possible before I dry it off. There's quite a lot of areas to work from. Giving it pretty much the same shade of colour and leaving an area on the right which would be the waves splashing against the large rocks on the right. And when you paint the sea, always make it darker as you get to the immediate foreground. I will be going over this again, but will darken it up with this first wash. Adding some other blues to this, bit of cobalt blue. Remembering to leave those white spaces, which is the waves where they're hitting the rocks. Now just wash that brush out, and I'm going to be using it for the first wash on the rocks, and I'm using raw sienna, burnt sienna, and raw umber. These are all called earth colours. And they're quite warm, which means that they bring the rocks more forward. Not fussing too much, just putting a first wash on here. We'll be going over it again, and some of it's bleeding in slightly, but not too worried too much about that. We'll cover that with paint. With these short videos, it's a case of trying to get as much as you can in as quickly as possible. And the rock to the left, just making it slightly different colour with more raw umber. Leaving a very, very small gap at the bottom, which is where the sea is going to be hitting the bottom of the rock, frothing up. And this is a Da Vinci Casaneo brush that I'm using. Has a very long point on it and seems to have a bit of a mind of its own, which is quite nice when you're doing things like leaves and rocks. It forms very nice shapes. These are the rocks that are the smaller rocks at the bottom of the larger rock on the right hand side. Now the colours here are Sepia and French Ultramarine, and the paper has dried. I turned the video off while I was drying it with a hairdryer, and just putting in these distant hills and rocks and things. Nice cool colour, which makes it all recede. Trying to keep a nice straight line there and leaving just a small area clear of any paint below it, which again is going to be where the sea in the distance is hitting the shore. Just taking off a bit of the paint on the left hand side there. Want some of it to look quite blurred, like it's well in the distance, and there's a little bit of mist, a little bit of froth coming up. And this is where I take the pencil marks off, where I've left the white paper. Quite easy to do because you can see the pencil marks. Quite a good way of working for beginners. It gives you something to work along, an edge to work along, makes you more confident when you're putting the washes on. Obviously in the future, when you get a little bit better, you can do a lot of this freehand without worrying about pencil marks. But it's good to look at cloud shapes and pencil it in. Doesn't have to exactly match mine. All the shapes are fairly random, as they would be in nature. And if you go slightly wrong, you can always just make the shape of the rock or the cloud slightly different. Going a bit darker now with some neutral tint and raw umber. Making this distant rocks really stand out against the lighter sky. Just taking my time, trying to get some nice rock shapes. And introducing some rocks in the foreground, in addition to those that are there already. Just putting in the rocks here, trying to make sure that they're all different shapes. They're all different shapes, or more or less, different sizes. And I'm going to be putting a second wash on this near a rock. Going over the blurred edge where it ran into the sky from earlier on. If I'd left it a bit longer earlier on, I wouldn't have to be doing this. It would be okay, but it's just trying to get things done quickly. Ideally, when you're doing this this kind of painting, you'd leave it to dry, go away, and then come back 5 minutes later when it's completely dry. But you can use a hairdryer. Just varying some of the colours here as I come down with this large rock cliff on the right hand side. And leaving the bottom area clear, which would be sand or something like that. Just makes it look a little bit more interesting. Nice dark edge on that, really stands out well against the white foam of the sea and the distant sky. And just putting in some shapes in the distance, which would be the colour of the dark rocks showing up in the water. Just keeping that very fine line there. And while it's still wet, you get the chance to darken it up and put some other colours in. Now I'm going to do some more work on the sea in the foreground, using the same colours that I did with the first wash: Cobalt, Turquoise, Cerulean Blue, although I've introduced some other blues as well, Cobalt Blue. Now I'm using a nice large palette, which I like to use, which is the John Pike palette. It enables me to mix large washes, which I can leave on the palette as I work, and I can dip into those colours as I work. Remembering the white spaces not to paint over them, and keeping this foreground nice and dark compared to the distant sea. And I want to introduce some greens here, so I'm using one of my ready-made greens, Hooker's Green, in with the blue mixture. Really makes that look in the you're quite close up to it. And don't worry too much about going over the masking tape. That will leave a nice line when we get to the end and take the masking tape off. And then very quickly going over the distant blue with Cobalt Turquoise, keeping those white spaces clear of paint as well, and try and do a nice jagged edge where the froth is coming up, where the sea's hitting that rock. As you see, not using any masking fluid. Just doing what they call pure watercolour. This will dry a little bit lighter. And just putting in a third rock there, which is going to be quite small. I'm just going to do that with one wash. Just removing a bit of that from the blue where it was bleeding into it slightly. And starting on the sky at the rear there. I had dried some of that off. And I'm just working on the rest of the sky. Nice watery mixture of Payne's grey and sepia. Just trying to make some interesting grey shadow shapes. And remembering it will dry lighter. Now going in with the rocks and using neutral tint, which is quite dark. Quite a dark colour, probably the darkest colour that I've got on my palette. Just putting in some what would be dark shadows on these rocks. Trying to make the rocks all slightly different. Using a small nylon brush, a synthetic. You don't have to use expensive brushes for these kind of paintings. This one is relatively cheap, as is this one as well, which is a smaller synthetic brush. They're both student grade brushes. Now put the initial darks on with the larger brush, and this smaller brush is just got some water on it, so I'm just blending it in, so not too many hard edges. Everything's quite wet, so I can still go over it. And removing the tape to reveal the nice sharp edge. Always pull the tape away from the paper and try not to leave it on too long, because the longer you leave it on, the more it sticks, and then you won't take any paper off, and that will leave you with a very nice crisp edge to frame your masterpiece. And there we are, that's it completed. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and you'll join me again in the future. Goodbye for now. Bye.